The stream is live. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are around the world. I want to thank you for coming to this meetup number 4 of the Intune for MSPs global community. I'm Andy Rosted. I'll be your host today as we have a really exciting deep dive today into a topic that has been really, really popular and in high demand from you, our audience. And we'll get into that in a little bit. First, some basic housekeeping. Again, we're around the world on all of these platforms. The Tech Community Live is going to be where you have the best real-time engagement. Joining the chat, you're able to pose questions in real time. And we've got some Microsoft experts on the call in the background. So I'm really going to encourage you today, if you're watching in real time, to participate in that chat. And this call series will continue at least for another 2 months, and we want to hear from you. I read every input, every survey answer that we get to make sure that we can create content that is valuable and meaningful for you. Take the survey at aka.ms/Intune MSP survey, pull out your device, scan that QR code, fill out that form. You'll have a chance to see this again later, so don't spill coffee fumbling for your device. And let's review our mission. Why are we here? Microsoft wants to understand the needs of managed service providers and respond with useful and relevant resources. This has been my focus for, it seems like 2 years now, and we are getting a really great response. Thank you all for being here, and keep asking your questions, making demands, and kicking the tires on the solutions that are out there. This would normally be the time when I introduce Lior Bella, but he's already in Paris for the MEMS Summit. We'll talk about that later, but I'll leave this slide up briefly enough so that you can scan the QR code. Following Lior on LinkedIn is a great way to keep up with all things Intune for MSP, Intune in general, and usually get some pretty good memes too. With that said, we have a nice, like I said, a deep dive session today. We're going to hear from Steve Weiner on Autopilot. Samuel will bring Steve up because we're going to throw to him next. And then I'll close with a really short and sweet announcement of what's next and news you can use. So with that, ladies and everybody who's present here today, watching at home and around the world, I give you Steve Weiner, Microsoft MVP, friend of the show. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you. Thanks, Andy, for having me. I appreciate it. Okay. I guess you want me to talk about Autopilot.
You bet.
All right, everyone. Well, thanks for joining today. So I am Steve Weiner, Microsoft MVP for Intune and Windows 365. I'm a principal architect at Get Rubix, where we help all kinds of folks and MSPs embrace modern Microsoft solutions. So what we're going to talk about today is the modern device challenge, we'll call it, right? Traditional provisioning, why it's holding back a lot of MSPs, right? What is Windows Autopilot? Because if you know what it is, great. If this is the first time you're hearing about it, hopefully not, but we're going to get into it. We'll talk about what it is. Very important is we'll talk about where the MSP opportunity is with Autopilot, right? It's not just about managing PCs with Intune. There is a lot of benefits from switching over this modern provisioning. We'll talk about, kind of get in the weeds technically, right? What the deployment scenarios look like, what the profiles are, the different flavors of Autopilot. We'll help you get started by talking about the prerequisites and, licenses, and get you to that first deployment, hopefully. And then we'll take your questions and we'll get into it. So let's start right here. What is the modern device challenge? Well, since Windows 10 came out, and that was some time ago, I'm sure you remember, we have been faced with the challenges of traditional imaging. And even though I'm calling it traditional, or some folks will call it legacy imaging, essentially a lot of folks still struggle with this. So manual imaging takes time, right? And the modern Windows operating system was built to not be imaged. It's built to be what we call provisioning. So when you're essentially factoring that in, all the manual labor, the time it takes, the effort to go into imaging every device, That is weeks of time. And from what I have heard from folks and everyone I talk to who's in the MSP game, that's not good for billing. That's not good for customer service. And frankly, there's better things your technical resources can be doing. Now, the other problem with traditional imaging is devices have to be physically handled and shipped somewhere. There has to be a staging location. There has to be technicians on site to maybe do the remaining manual tasks to get the device up and running. And again, we're talking costs, we're talking time. So there's got to be a better way, right? And then, of course, inconsistent config. I still talk to a lot of folks where perhaps they're laying down an image, perhaps they're using a task sequence of some kind, but then when before the PC goes to the end user, there is a list. I'm talking about like paper, right? It's typed up, it's paper. There is something where a technician is following things, and they have to go through a checklist and manually configure things on a device. And whenever you're doing that, we're leaving ourselves open for error. Things could get missed, and then now you're back into the break fix ticket cycle. So how do we solve this, right? It's kind of the setup. Well, let's talk about what autopilot is. So from the beginning, autopilot is a collection of technologies, I like to say. And the whole idea is it's used to configure new Windows devices out of the box without IT touching the device. So high level, a device can ship directly to the end user from the reseller, OEM, the distributor, um, directly to the end user. No one has touched the box yet. The end user is the first person to take the device out of the box. They power it on. They sign in with their Microsoft credentials, also known as Entra ID credentials, or also known as Azure AD. Sometimes it's hard to let names go. They sign in with their credentials. Autopilot pushes a profile to the device that will Entra ID join it and enroll it into Intune management. From there, applications, policies, settings, scripts, updates, everything deploys automatically from Intune, right? So what's the benefit of this? So we're not touching it, we're not imaging it, right? We don't have to manage golden images. We don't have to worry about injecting drivers and which OS we're laying down. The drivers and Windows, in most cases, they come on the PC we're buying. So let's leave them alone and not touch them. We're just going to leave that and start there. There's a big push to go for cloud native devices, right? Have a device Entra ID join. Well, this is Entra ID join out of the box from day one. There's nothing we have to do. The user signs in, boom, that's it. It's entirely Intune driven. So whatever your current policy, application, settings are, if they're one way today, and then tonight I make changes, and tomorrow I have a new set of policy and apps, that's being deployed fresh. So I'm always getting a fresh set of content on the device. And then we're going to talk about this a little bit more because some things have changed, but basically the devices can be registered directly from the OEM or from where you're procuring them from. And there's even new flows now where we don't have to do this. So let's talk about how it works. Okay, and this is what I will call is the traditional Windows Autopilot. So an OEM ships a device, and you might not know this, but your major vendors, your hardware manufacturers out there, when they build PCs, right, they are pre-registering them with Microsoft's Autopilot service. So when you procure them from the reseller, distributor, the OEM, the VAR, wherever, they're already, they're aware. So when you procure them for your customer, you just have to register them to that customer. There's a very simple process for it. There's an API that can be used for it, and it's very well documented. So the device is associated to that organization, your customer, before anything even ships. The end user receives the device, connects it to the internet. The Windows Pro and later will always call out to see if they belong somewhere, to see if they belong to Autopilot. That means if I buy myself a new gaming PC with Windows Pro on it, it's going to check in with Autopilot, but I don't have to worry because it's not registered anywhere. So I could just continue on my day and play my games. But if this is one of the registered PCs you've purchased for your customer, it's going to detect an Autopilot profile and that will be applied. Now, what's in the Autopilot profile? The Autopilot profile contains settings for the out-of-box experience. Anyone who's gone through the out-of-box experience knows that there's some things in there, a lot of extra things that you might not want the user to go through, right? Accepting the EULA, naming the device, um, all kinds of stuff we want to streamline. So that's what the Autopilot profile does, right? It streamlines it, customizes it, hides some things, add some things. You can see your organization branding, which is very nice. And essentially, this prompts the user to sign in with their organization account. The user then signs in, the device joins to Entra. So right there, it's up there, the object's there, the device is associated to the user, and then it immediately enrolls in Intune, where based on what we have configured, policies, applications, security baselines will deploy automatically. So literally, just from taking it out of the box, powering it on, going through the process, you will end up on a production ready device. Now, just some high level numbers. When we talk about the opportunity, um, we are talking in most cases over a 75% reduction in provisioning time, right? Provisioning time meaning time for a user to get a device and be productive. In the actual labor, on average, over $200 per device deployment, over 3 times faster time to being productive for a new employee, right? Think about everything a new hire has to do when they're onboarded. Getting a device is one of them, and this just makes that faster. And of course, we're 100% cloud managed from day one, right? So let's talk about some scenarios that Autopilot presents us with, because I already talked about kind of the high level flow. So we have user driven pre-provisioning and self-deploying, right? So Autopilot can look like a few different things depending on your situation. So right up front, user driven, I already walked you through that. Box goes to end user, they power it on, walk right through, and they're at a box. But let's say you have use cases where you need to push a large amount of applications to a device, right? You're in a situation where users have to take the device and start using it immediately, and they don't have the luxury of provisioning, or they're possibly in an area of maybe the bandwidth's not so great. There's all kinds of use cases where this has come up. So in that case, we have something called pre-provisioning. So pre-provisioning allows the reseller, you as the MSP, to essentially stage the device. It uses what's called a technical flow, where the device is powered on first, connected to a network, and completes its device provisioning, meaning by itself, when it sees that it belongs to Autopilot, it'll enter join, and Intune will go ahead and enroll the device and push all of the policies and, more importantly, all the applications to the device ahead of time. And then it goes through what's called a reseal process. The device is then given directly to the user, and the user has a dramatically faster login experience. So there's some pros and cons, right? There's a little more work on the MSP side up front. There's less time for the end user, so it really depends on the situation, but it is an option. Now, self-deploying is for our kiosks, our shared devices that don't have a dedicated single user. Self-deploying Autopilot allows the device to provision all by itself just by taking it out of the box, plugging it in to Ethernet and power, and the device will boot up by itself and start provisioning. And this is perfect for those, point of sale machines, the kiosks, anything that's shared, because you don't need to go ahead and then log in with a user. And we've seen this a lot in the retail space, frontline workers. So these are your primary autopilot scenarios. I think what's really exciting now, though, that we see is, let's see here. Oh, sorry about that. Computers are hard. Anyway, autopilot device preparation is a new flavor of autopilot, and I would say it's the next generation, and it's where things are going to be headed going forward. So, autopilot device preparation took all the learnings from the original and kind of streamlined things. So, it came out in 2024, and what is it, right? What are the key differences? So, I will say up front, this is the preferred starting point if you haven't used autopilot before and you're looking to deliver a user-driven experience for end users. This is the way forward. Number one, there's no hardware hash upload required. So earlier when I talked about OEM registration, we don't have to worry about that, right? You don't need to get the hardware hash from the device. You don't need to manually register that with autopilot. That's been streamlined. Policy and app delivery via Intune. Not only does that stay the case, so Intune remains the focal management point, but you have additional options and more control over the required apps and device scripts that get deployed right before the user takes control of the device. So instead of having autopilot, and if you've used autopilot before, you know what the ESP is, that's become one controllable platform now. And what's really nice is inside of Intune, there's real-time deployment tracking per device. So we now have persistent monitoring of what's going on with the provisioning when we use device prep. It's Entra ID native, obviously, because cloud native is the future. It's a much faster provisioning process, and let me show you the flow of that. It's not very different from the user-driven show I showed before. So the really good thing is if you've, like I said, if you've never used autopilot, start here. If you have used it and your users are on that, user-driven autopilot experience, there's not a big shift for them. So all that happens here is on the IT side, you create a autopilot device prep policy that will have you include both things from the UBI settings, things that were in the original autopilot profile. You're going to add your required apps and scripts inside of it. You can tell the device which Entra ID group to go to directly, which is a very nice feature because different profiles, you might want to send different devices to different groups. And then, of course, you'll assign that policy. And then the device powers on, same situation, you connect to the network. What happens is you sign in with your Microsoft credentials just like before, and now the device preparation policy is detected, right? So now it has all the required apps and scripts that you've assigned with this profile. They come down, the user signs into the desktop, and once again, you're at a production ready state. So I definitely recommend folks check this out for the first time, or if you've used autopilot previously and you have a user-driven use case, by all means, start looking at device preparation, right? It makes things a lot easier, especially in the procurement world, right? If, maybe you have a smaller shop and we're not buying thousands of devices from a VAR or directly from an OEM. So this will definitely help out there. Now let's talk about actually getting started with everything. So what are the licensing requirements? Well, good thing this is very similar to what we've talked about in the past when we talk about cloud native management. So licensing requirements, you can do M365 Business Premium, you can do E3, you can do E5. Basically what you need is Intune, the plan one, and Entra ID plan one. And if you have those things, then essentially however you're consuming the licensing, you'll be all set. So what I would typically recommend for your first autopilot deployment, if you just want to test it, right? Whether it's original autopilot, device prep. Essentially, this is how you get started, right? Make sure the Intune tenant is configured. And if you're managing PCs with Intune today, then you're already set. It means you have policies, you have applications, you have assignments for those. You're going to create an autopilot profile, either a traditional autopilot profile or a device preparation profile, however you decide to do it. And you configure the UV settings, you configure which apps and scripts you want configured to that device via the profile. If you're using traditional autopilot, you're going to register the devices using the hardware hash process. If you're using device preparation, all you have to do is, if you're blocking personal enrollment on devices, you just have to add serial numbers with corporate identifiers. It's very easy to do. You can do it without touching the box. And Microsoft has documented steps for everything you need there. Once you assign the profile to devices, you can either assign them to specific groups. You can assign them to all devices. Probably wouldn't do that. We always like groups, keep things a little contained. And then if it's your first test, you just open the PC once the profile is assigned and walk through the enrollment steps. Or if we're deploying this for the first time to production users, you're just going to ship the device to the end user and go from there. And as far as adopting this, right? The current recommendation, right? Because it's easy to say, yeah, go try this. It's the greatest thing since sliced bread, and start shipping devices. But, we have to be smart about adopting anything new in the environment. So what I would recommend for MSPs is, take a look at the current provisioning processes, the way we're deploying endpoints today, the way we're onboarding folks, and identify who is what I would call autopilot ready, right? Do you have users who are, I would say, remote? It would be a lot easier to ship them a device. What does their workflow look like, right? If it's just a single user notebook and they're using the Microsoft 365 apps, they're using Exchange, they're using, apps that you've already packaged in Intune, and they're Win32 apps, and you deploy those to them. That sounds like a really good use case to start with. Start small, pick a controlled pilot, 5, 10 devices, right? And validate one use case, right? Do user-driven profile. That's definitely the best place to start when it comes to autopilot. It gives you the opportunity to use device preparation, and the small pilot allows you to configure everything the way you want, do your testing and validation, and make sure the users are also having a good experience, right? And like any other pilot, we gather feedback, and if need be, we tweak, we remediate, we optimize, and we do it again. As far as what comes next, like everything else, we want to operationalize it, build your SOPs, automate the device onboarding, standardize the type of config you use for what gets deployed to the device during the provisioning process, train your help desk, and then of course at scale, you're going to roll this out for all hopefully all customers and their endpoints. So let me just review some of the key takeaways. I know there are some questions. I'm excited to get to those. So let me just run down these. Main thing is autopilot eliminates imaging, right? It eliminates the manual setting up of the devices. And I always like to say, think about smartphones and tablets that you deploy. You don't take these, you don't unbox them and image them. You just generally hand them to end users. End user signs in, and they're expected to get what they need to do their job. And that's kind of the same thinking behind it, right? This puts us in the cloud native spot from day one. So we're in Entra ID, we're using Intune, we have the modern stack. There's generally no hybrid join requirements, right? Think about SMB customers, so we can kick this off cloud native from day one. In most cases, when an MSP standardizes on autopilot, they now have a scalable, repeatable service. It's very easy to bundle and price. It's very easy to onboard new customers faster because of this process. And in the event you do need something more controlled or more complex, you have other options. You have pre-provisioning, you have self-deploy mode. So it's not all or nothing with the user driven. It's very robust, and you're going to have your choices over how you deploy this. And again, start small, do a pilot, do your internal validation, and we'll go from there. So I am now going to turn to some questions here, and let's go ahead. And where's Andy? There's Andy.
Here he is. All right. First of all, awesome stuff. Thank you, Steve. Lot of good questions, good conversation here. The first one we got, and I swear this question isn't a plant, but it's sort of the perfect one for discussion. From LinkedIn, do you, Steve Weiner, think MSP-focused automation like autopilot is still an efficiency play, or is this about standardizing security and compliance at scale? And again, this is not a question I invented to talk about the value of the process.
Yeah, that's perfect. I don't have cash on me. No, I think it's both, right? Autopilot is always been about efficiency when you look at it at face value, right? The ability to take something. I remember working with folks and looking at the imaging warehouses and everything they were doing. You'd see the laptops lined up. I mean, that's very inefficient, and that's so much time and it's so much manpower that to eliminate that is a massive gain. But yeah, as we progress down the broader, when you zoom out of Intune, you're in this zero trust cloud journey, right? And that's the whole point of going cloud native. It's not just to be cool, it's to be more secure. This is a massive leap forward for it. So I think the idea that we can, like I said before, we could start by using autopilot to put us in a cloud native state immediately means, instead of making sure we've built the latest image every few months and we lay that down, it means when the device is born, it always gets the latest configs and apps from Intune in real time. It means latest app versions, latest policy revisions. It's a massive gap we're solving for by doing this.
You segued into the third question, so sorry, second question. Only I know what order these questions came in, but the third question we have is about app packaging in Intune. This is a functionality that Intune has evolved a lot more recently, lately, and I know that for MSPs, it hasn't always displaced their existing app deployment workflows. Can you speak a little bit about how it's different in your experience, and why it might be more secure to package and deploy apps from Intune, especially in this scenario?
Yeah. Well, think about, I'll call it we'll call it chain of ownership, right? The device is born and it talks to Intune, and Intune is responsible for pushing the applications down to it. So knowing where those applications are coming from is really important. I will agree, like in the beginning of Intune, right? If we go back 2015 and earlier, app packaging was not a strong point. We were extremely limited to what we can do. And then as it evolved until, present day, we have tremendous capabilities around the types of apps we can package, right? You can package multi-file apps, you have dependencies, you have supersedence. So I think as far as if MSPs say, we're not doing our packaging there, or we don't feel like that's sufficient enough for our needs, 9 times out of 10 it's because we just haven't looked at it in a while. And it's an easy thing to do, right? Your job is to service your customers, not to keep tabs on technology all the time or what's changed with a certain stack. So it's important to do, and I will say Microsoft is so committed. They're working with a lot of very special third parties that are helping them with app packaging. So there's a lot of programs right now for MSPs with third-party products that are enhancing the app packaging that Intune can do, just to help make the MSP day-to-day a lot easier.
Yeah, and I will talk about those after our Q&A portion. Here's a question from the tech community. So pre-provisioning mode takes a lot of, this is a quote, pre-provisioning mode takes a lot of time while running the account setup phase because of app validation, et cetera. So in a scenario where you're doing a loaner device, like a short-term use, and that device needs to be provisioned, the question goes on, pre-provisioning takes a long time and is, maybe not best for a loaner.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where the question says, I think this is where they are pivoting to use the self-deployment method. It finishes the ESP pretty fast when the device is handed over to a user. But can you, Steve, provide any inputs or suggestion based on your experience on how this building a loaner, a short-term device to be handed over to a user and returned in a short period of time, using Autopilot, are they on the right track? Is there a better way in your experience for building like this?
I think self-deploy is good. I think the best way to look at a loaner device is a shared device. Loaner is something we've tried to crack in the past. I know I've done some interesting solutions for loaners with Get Rubik's for folks. So absolutely reach out to talk more in depth. But high level, I would say, yeah, the self-deploy makes the most sense. You may also want to consider the Autopilot device prep, since it is very user-driven. You're not pre-registering the hardware with the hash beforehand, so you can literally assign that profile to a group of users and do it that way if you want. But honestly, yeah, I think self-deploy, skip account setup in that scenario because the user is logging in. And in this case, I think because it's a loaner, we're okay giving them a more generic set of apps, right? And think about it, like, what can't they do on the browser 9 times out of 10? And if it's so specialized that they need, like, AutoCAD, for example, that's not a loaner scenario. So as long as we're kind of balancing what belongs there and what doesn't, I think you're okay going that route.
And because we're Microsoft, I'll offer here that a Windows 365 cloud PC might be the ideal solution for a scenario, especially if you've got a lot of loaner and a lot of churn. Those are provisioned within Intune. So all the familiar, like, bells, whistles, bits, and bobs, but spinning one up, if you give it the stopwatch test, I think you'll find that you'll have an active Windows 365 cloud PC sooner than you might have any other instance. That's my experience of spinning up cloud PCs. Yours may differ, and don't at me if it's different. So we were talking just now about, like, the end user experience and user provision. But Steve, we know, because we've worked with end users and been end users ourselves, that things that seem easy sometimes aren't. What's your experience been with end users during this provisioning process? What are some best practices? How can people think about, in your experience, what are some things to be aware of when preparing end users to participate in their own device provisioning?
Yeah, I would say over communicate, right? While documentation is fine, I've helped folks. I mean, you can do it yourself. Make a short little video demo of the Autopilot process and put it somewhere, like on a SharePoint or some kind of whatever communications platform, to let people know what to expect. The other thing is, relate everything to what users know. We are in 2026, and your users are also consumers. They buy smartphones, they buy tablets. They are not, oblivious to the idea of getting a new device, signing in. So kind of lay into what they know, right? If you think about, most users buy new phones, they sign in, they get their stuff to come back. What do they do when they want apps? They go to a store. These are things that are kind of in the, the primate brain now, subconsciously. So we're familiar with it. So kind of lean into that. And also make sure you're not skipping over the user-facing prompts when things go wrong, when you're building an Autopilot profile, when you're building ESP. Make sure if something goes wrong, the right help message is there. You have the help desk phone number, you have the right email address, because if something does go wrong, it should be easy for them to get help.
Yeah, that's a good point, right? There are opportunities to customize that messaging in the setup, and it's tempting often. I think in writing a policy, I don't always have my, like, customer service hat on, but this is definitely something that can be different for a lot of people who haven't encountered this. And my experience in working in the tech business is I don't realize that I know a lot more about technology than other people who know what they need to do their job, but don't live, breathe, and have fun pushing buttons and trying to break things. So another question here, Steve. So I don't know, have a sip of hot tea with lemon for your voice, because we're going to keep you going. Here's a question on tech community. The user writes, for a few reasons, we prefer to configure the device using Immy.bot, IMMY.bot. This is not an endorsement. I am just reading what is on the screen. Not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly. This question says, we use Autopilot strictly to install the Immy.bot agent and then auto-onboard the device using Immy. Currently, we have the device using a tupple through the partner center. Instead of having the OEM or reseller add them, as there is normally a cost associated with having the OEM add the devices. Okay. Is there something this questioner is not considering that would make using Autopilot or Intune a more desirable process? I would take the first stab here as being that you've got with an Autopilot device preparation policy, if you can use that, you don't need the OEM or reseller as part of the process at all. Am I right about that?
That is correct. Yeah, Autopilot device prep does not use the hardware hash, so using the tuple, using the OEM to register goes out the window. But it does look like also with this other tool, and I can't speak to it. It's the first time I'm seeing Immy.bot. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. But I would say, like, if someone, so yeah, for the first part of the question, look at Autopilot device prep, because I think it would probably be a better experience in that case, because you don't have to deal with the registration. Now, the other side of it is, it says making Autopilot and Intune more desirable. Autopilot only does so much. It essentially valet parks the device to Intune. So if the Intune configuration isn't where you want it to be in terms of apps or policies, nothing on the Autopilot side is going to make it better. So Intune should be in a really good place first, because why would you want to get valet treatment into a club you don't want to be in, right? Or expedited, getting into anywhere you don't want to be. So I would consider that first. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you very much for that. And we've got another question. I love it. Thanks. I'm going to give an award to this audience, you here live, for being the most participatory audience we've had. Must be because Steve's bringing the heat. Are you aware, Steve, this is the questioner asking, are you aware of any tool that exists out there to see if a Windows PC has been previously registered or is still registered to another tenant? Maybe you buy a refurb or pre-used device and you're giving it to a new user so that you can see if it's registered without opening the OEM box. So this would be like, I think you're buying a refurb from a major reseller.
Yeah.
But maybe, wipes are not always equal.
That's a very good question. And my answer is going to be to work with your Microsoft resources on that, because I believe only Microsoft can give you that answer without opening it up and diving through the registry. I know we have some Autopilot product folks in the wings, so if I'm off on that, I will invite them to yell at me or give me the virtual smack in the head. But I know I've worked for an MSP prior, and that was our go-to. We had some tremendous Microsoft resources, and if that question came up, we would reach out to them with the device information, and they would give us a yay or nay on that.
All right. Well, I have asked our product whisperers to opine on that. In the meantime, we've got another question here, and that is, what's the best way to standardize configurations across customers? Now, I'm going to assume this is tenant to tenant, different MSP customers, while allowing some customization. So, the Andy Co. Policies are going to be a little different than the Rubix policies, but I, as an MSP, I want to keep some order to that, right? How do I manage it?
Yeah. So the best way to think about it and then to execute it. So thinking about it, you want to have a standard, And perhaps that's across all customers or different verticals. So maybe you have a standard for healthcare customers and then financial. So you want to have a standard baseline that works, that you're comfortable managing and will secure your customers. And then that'll give yourself room to customize on top of that. But then the question is, how do you manage the customizations? So I personally, there's a tool, Microsoft has a great Intune for MSP program. We have one as well. I talk about a lot of this stuff. So if you want, get Rebix.com/Intune for MSP. But one of the things I talk about, is Tenant Manager, right? Tenant Manager is my preferred tool that I go to. It's a great Microsoft partner tool where it helps you do exactly that. So it helps you deploy a standard, and then if you do customizations, you can manage that as a standard for that tenant. So let's say you have done your customizations on a baseline you put out there, and now that becomes the baseline for tenant X. You can then make sure you're managing that and make sure that doesn't drift. So for an MSP, 100%, I would look at that.
Yeah, and I want to build on what Steve's talking about, aka.ms/Intune for MSPs. That'll take you to the resource page. There it is. So thank you, production team. On that page, we have just onboarded 3 new partners who specialize in multi-tenant management of Intune for MSPs. So if you've been in the game for a long time, if you've been working with Microsoft, you know that Lighthouse for a while was the product that was offering some multi-tenant management. Lighthouse has evolved to become much more about helping you understand the licensing and sales, more of a licensing focused tool, and the multi-tenant space has been occupied by some of these independent software vendors. Right now, we have 5 partners who have been validated by Microsoft. They're using the technology in the right way, built on top of Intune, so you're not installing, you're not burdening your device, you're not adding technology, you're staying within the Microsoft ecosystem. Check that out, kick the tires on these solutions. Steve's got his opinion. You're going to see a lot of, there's a video on there with some reviews. Open source commercial solutions, we've got it for you there. And that's definitely one of the features that we select for, is how do you maintain the equivalent of that golden tenant kind of idea while being able to keep them up to date, make baselines and fork those for different customers. So it's not just the device profiles, right? It's the security baselines that are also super important. I want to go back to the question about whether there's a tool to see if a device has been previously registered. Microsoft doesn't make a tool like that, but our Microsoft expert says that the OEM from whom you are purchasing this refurb device does or should have, according to expert opinion that I am quoting, they should have ways. They should have ways of seeing these things. But it sounds like your question is born out of experience. So if you've had a different experience, you want to follow up on that. One, thank you, Steve, for being here. We're going to wrap it up in a little bit soon. But again, Steve's really great about engaging with community. Asking Steve questions is a great way to get things. The other is following Lior on LinkedIn, engaging with him. He's really active and is there for you to ask questions. Again, the tech community questions that you asked here that we didn't get a chance to answer, questions that occur to you if you're watching this and reporting, put your questions in. We want to hear from you. Again, just like our mission says, we're here to let the MSP community know that Microsoft is thinking about you, building for you, and knows that we have an opportunity to really help you grow your business. So with that, I want to say thank you, Steve, again. We'll see you soon. Not on the calendar, but you never know when I might ring your bell. And with that, I'll go back to presenting my screen, and we'll just step through a couple of announcements and news here. So Samuel, as soon as I'm ready, you can take me split screen. Everybody, thanks, Steve. We're clapping you up, Steve. Great. This is Steve's second appearance. It's 2-timer. And he's also made some great videos on our on Intune for MSPs, that resource page. You'll find videos on how to get started with Intune. Maybe these are good for your new techs that you're onboarding. You really want people to get up to speed with Intune. We have videos there that are really about what do I do. I watch the video on one screen, I have my console on the other, and it tells you how to configure Microsoft 365 BP and Intune from the start to get a nice secure baseline. It's one size fits most, but it's certainly easier than trying to wade through the guidance, which gives you, the documentation tells you everything you can do. This is focused on everything you should do to set up an SMB as an MSP. So where can you find Intune Live? Tomorrow, if you're watching live, tomorrow, Lior will be present at the Modern Endpoint Management Summit. If you're going to be there in Paris, congratulations, April in Paris. But there are roundtable discussions. There are Microsoft folks all over the floor looking to get your feedback. This is your opportunity to talk to Microsoft and talk about those scenarios that you really need to solve for, things that are going to unblock you. We want to hear that. You'll also hear a lot of news about the product. Friend of the show, Eric Loeff's going to be presenting with Lior and Sengi, the VP of Intune product, are going to be there giving a keynote. So great, exciting stuff there. And as always, we've got some news you can use. This is a hot off the presses, brand new page that we've released on that topic of application migration. So we put together a resource page, not unlike that Intune for MSPs page. This is dedicated to resources you need to get in touch with and understand the partners and the offers that they offer to help you migrate your apps to Intune. So if you don't know what this process is like, adding an app into Intune involves rewrapping it in a proprietary file format. These partners have developed technology to make that process easier, and they are offering 2 free months of their packaging services. So if you've got a backlog, if you thought, well, I want to do this, but I don't have time, I don't have the resources, this can be a really great opportunity, getting in touch with one of our partners, taking advantage of their offers to get your apps into Intune and start taking advantage of these device preparation policies where your apps are delivered and kept up to date without having to go through the extra steps, adding a third-party tool. We're really proud of the work that's been done on the product and the way that it continues to improve. And these partners have really generously offered to help you. Even if you've got big apps, we've got a partner who specializes in really complicated stuff. So if you've got that AutoCAD 10 gigabyte, app package, and you're wondering how to get that deployed, we've heard great stuff from those partners. So I encourage you to check out the resource page. And since it's brand new and we are human, if you see something that's wrong, let us know, drop a comment. We want to make sure that all of our links and everything are working for you. And with that in mind, as promised, this show is for you and about MSPs. So set the agenda, help us set the agenda. We're going to go to, I'm going to invite you to go to aka.ms/Intune MSP survey in order to let us know what you want to see from the show. Like I said, we read all your comments and we weigh them all when we're inviting our special guests. And I will, as soon as this recording wraps, I will update the shortcut URL to our app packaging resource page. That will be aka.ms/Intune app migration. And give me 10 minutes after I wrap the show. And guess what? I'm about to wrap the show. So start your clocks, keep me honest. And we're really grateful that you have decided to spend your time with us live on recording. And we hope you get a lot of value out of this series. And again, let us know what you want to hear, engage with us, ask questions. We love to answer them and ultimately make your business better. So I've been Andy Rostad. This has been the Intune for MSPs meetup. We'll see you next month.